Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our final Westwood Trust Creative Chat of 2020. My name is Claire Williamson, and I am the Director of Education and Community Engagement at Society for the Performing Arts. To describe myself and my surroundings, I am a white woman with long brown hair and dark-rimmed glasses. I'm wearing a white and red patterned top with gold earrings, and there are several framed photos on the wall behind me. I am so pleased to be chatting this evening with another awardee of the Houston Artist Commissioning Project, WindSync. SPA's Houston Artist Commissioning Project launched this summer as an opportunity to provide economic and creative support to Houston's artist community. The virtual phase of this project has been rolling out this fall, and we're accepting applications from local working artists through this Friday, December 18th, for the live phase of the project. To learn more about the Houston Artist Commissioning Project and to apply, please visit our website. The link is shown on screen and available in the chat. Now, before we delve into the conversation this evening, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the many Indigenous communities that have long used and continue to use this land as a living and gathering space. SPA's offices in Jones Hall are located on ancestral land traversed by the Karankawa, Atakapa Ishak, Sana, and Colwitakan people. The Alabama Coushatta people migrated to the Houston area over 3 centuries ago, and they have played a large role in shaping the culture and economy of our region as well. We acknowledge these communities to offer recognition and respect for their lived experience and to broaden awareness of the forces that have led to this moment. And to wrap up this year's celebration of cultural contributions of Indigenous peoples to our region, I invite you all to check out the virtual Sacred Springs Powwow in San Marcos, which is virtual this year, presented through the Indigenous Cultures Institute. On their site, you can experience videos of incredible Native artists sharing their passion and creativity, and you can learn more about future events, both live and virtual. The link is in the chat and also shown on screen here. It's now my pleasure to introduce members of WindSync, SPA's Houston Artist Commissioning Project virtual grantee. Since the ensemble's founding in 2009, WindSync has built a reputation as one of the finest North American wind quintets, backed by national and international level prizes in chamber music performance. WindSync infuses their traditional genre of Western classical chamber music with relevancy and energy by focusing on innovation, collaboration, and special programming for children and families. In Houston, they curate and perform a 3-concert series each season and present the Onstage Offstage Chamber Music Festival, designed to connect the people and neighborhoods of Houston through music education and music in public spaces. WindSync has appeared in recital at halls around the country and the world, and they have been named 3 times to the touring roster of Texas Commission on the Arts. Also with us this evening is Akshaya Avril Tucker. Akshaya is a composer drawing inspiration from the music and dance traditions of South Asia. She trained as a cellist and Odissi dancer from a young age. She's collaborated with numerous artists on commissions and various projects. She holds a Master's of Music in Composition from the University of Texas at Austin and a Bachelor's in Music from Brown University. She has received many awards, including the ASCAP Morton Gould Young Composer Award in 2019. Welcome to Akshaya, Kara, and Ani. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Claire.
Hi, thank you so much for having us.
Well, thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to get this conversation started. I have a couple of questions prepared, and of course, as always, if our virtual audience would like to chime in, please post a question in the live chat on either Facebook or YouTube, and we'll do our best to cover it. So first, I'd love to talk about how this collaboration came to be. What is the process of collaborating between an ensemble and a composer?
Sure, I can speak to that. So when you're in an ensemble, your dream is to have your own body of repertoire that you can play. And classically trained musicians, we're basically just interpreters. We're so often playing just something that a composer wrote, maybe even before we were born, and trying to figure out the intention of that composer and trying to make it meaningful to us personally. There's a lot that goes with interpretation, but the greatest gift is if we have a piece that was written maybe even with us in mind, but at least with our instruments in mind and by a composer who we select ourselves. So that's actually kind of unique among the arts disciplines, is that we really do rely a lot on a composer. And we knew about Akshaya's music because she had written a wind quintet before. So we had been kind of poking around, looking at who had new wind quintets. So we knew she had experience writing for our instrumentation specifically. And then it really dawned on us, well, first of all, wanting to work with Texas artists. That's a big goal of WindSync's. So Texas composers were important. She was in Austin recently. And that was the kicker, was that one of our great friends, who's a violinist in Austin, was performing a piece by Akshaya earlier this year on a pandemic live stream. And it was like, oh, we have to play something by this composer. This is so resonant, and even her composition for just one instrument, just one violin, really spoke to us.
Wow, that's incredible. What was the collaboration like, not, with keeping in mind of the pandemic? Like, were you able to meet in person? Did you do a lot of virtual? What was that process like?
It was all virtual, actually. Maybe Ani could describe the timeline that we went through.
Yeah, it's actually kind of unfortunate. We've only ever seen Akshaya as you see her now over the screen. I was thinking about that today. But it began with like emails and phone calls, and then we actually did have a moment where we were able to share some sounds. So Akshaya sent us some sketches, and we were able to kind of record them and send them back to her, and so she could kind of hear what certain sketches might sound like. So that's kind of how the collaboration went. Honestly, though, in today's world of people,
I think we may have lost Ani.
Oh, Ani's out in San Francisco. It's that internet on the West Coast.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, and like, these technical things are just another part of that process.
Sure.
Definitely.
Do you feel like the process took longer than it would if you were in person, or was it about the same?
I don't think it really affected it, actually. Of course, it affected it in other ways, but I think the timeline was actually quite efficient. We were very I felt very open to be very direct. And I think WindSync did as well. You kind of be like, here's this idea. What do you think? Here's this idea. What do you think? So we were very just on the money the whole time.
That's great. Yeah, it kind of provides you with a little bit more focus, I guess.
In some ways, yeah. I mean, but of course, I would love to be able to hang out with you all in person one of these days.
Yeah. There's a great moment. I think it was in September when WindSync was able to meet up, at least in my backyard, and do a distanced rehearsal outdoors.
Oh,
yeah, wind players, we don't really get to play with masks on very successfully. Right. So we had the disembodied head of Akshaya on a Zoom window out on my patio table. And so that does take a lot of trust, because in music, we think a lot about acoustics, and we get really detailed about very small bits of music performance. So I think there was a lot of just trust that we had to give each other, and just make sure that the piece would develop organically as we passed it between each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that I definitely carried that sense of trust myself. I mean, having like the first part of my process, just listening to all of your work, like all the recordings, wonderful recordings of WindSync on YouTube, and kind of getting a vibe for the kind of the way that they play and like the general quality level, so I can know, like, if I write this thing that's difficult, I know they can do it. And especially in the first rollout of the piece, they did such a good job. They were like, they played it so well. So I even thought, okay, maybe I need to make this a little harder.
Wow.
Make them work a little harder for it, because they can do it, and they can so we can show off their amazing skills.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, I'm sure this was probably what Ani was referring to right before she got cut off, but the way things are in our digital world, even without the pandemic, there's just so much information available online and so many different ways to communicate that I'm sure that that impacts the creative process in terms of knowing what an artist is capable of and finding new collaborators, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I also want to talk about the inspiration for this commission piece, which is called Hold Sacred. Carrie, you mentioned to me that that WindSync offered Akshaya this theme of sacredness to meditate on while composing. I'd love to know where that theme came from. Was there a particular impetus for that?
Yes, if we go way back to the beginning of this program idea, there's actually a big thread in Western music history, even going to the very, very early days of the sacred versus the profane. And originally that was just a way of saying music for church versus folk music, essentially. But composers have taken that and run with it throughout all of music history. There are a lot of pieces specifically with this title, sacred and profane, or they'll be labeled with one of those terms. And the interpretations of those words have changed through the centuries. So we thought that was really cool. We were hoping to have this glorious quintet program that we would be touring all over the world this year that was dealing with sacred music and profane music. And so we wanted our commissions to reflect that programming thread too. But this year, those terms take on an additional meaning. And so it's been interesting hearing how Akshaya reflected on sacredness specifically. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Akshaya.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll bring Ani back on. She just popped back. Go ahead, Akshaya, please.
Sure. So yeah, I was very excited to hear about this theme. In general, I do carry some ideas from Indian spirituality into my work, especially coming from the dance tradition that I grew up doing and studying, which is a classical Indian dance style that originated in temples. So it has this kind of devotional element. And so there's always some connection there with the sacred, which I find really interesting to kind of counterpoint against more Western, the Western music history approach to sacredness. So that was my initial thought, was oh, I could definitely bring in something to do with the body and with dance. And it kind of evolved from there to be more about comfort and about, still about the body, but about what we're holding, and this idea that we could hold sacredness and what that might feel like in a pandemic. And for me, that was mainly what I was focusing on, was thinking about the kind of things that comfort us. And for me in particular, things that have to do with touch, whether it's feeling like feathers or yarn, or the kind of things that are extremely simple but really might calm our entire nervous system. Less intellectual activities, less of intellectual pursuits to try to distract us, and more just sensory experiences to just bring ourselves into the present moment and know that things are going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, it is so important to be able to find things that ground us and make us feel safe, especially during these times.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I look forward to hearing more about your thoughts in that process as well.
For sure, yeah.
Having seen the finished video, I can say that the visuals are incredible. And I think we should talk a little bit about the video that you created for the premiere and the visual experience. How did that come together?
Yeah, so that was funny because I guess I wouldn't want to speak for you, Akshaya, but I don't think any of us really had much video production experience. And actually in WindSync, we didn't even have much audio recording experience. So this whole production became a new learning process for us. And I think because of that, it was incredibly collaborative, almost in a way more creative and collaborative than like the typical back and forth of just creating the music notation for a piece between a composer and an artist. So really the idea kind of came from Akshaya. We had been thinking about dancing, and we had seen Akshaya's dance that she had created alongside her musical works in the past. And so that was kind of where that was coming from. But Akshaya had passed us these little demos of projections, so shadows of her dancing. And we thought that was so amazing. So we ended up working that into our musical performance too. And because this all had to be recorded asynchronously, so we were each essentially recording from home recording studios and not performing together, just ourselves. This actually was helpful visually because it was able to offer this unity of like a visual look. And there were ways then for our video editor to put us essentially in the same frame, in the same room together in a lot of interesting and creative ways. So you kind of don't really miss the togetherness. It actually coheres.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. Yeah, it's it kind of distorts that the distance and allows for there to feel this collaboration in the community within the video frame. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And I would just say on the flip side, I do think that it still came out very much as an artifact of the pandemic.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, like in the video, you don't really see anyone's face. It's all done in silhouette. It's all done with kind of auras around each of us, and there's like a certain murkiness that you get that feels very 2020 too.
Definitely, yeah. It was a great experience to be passing ideas back and forth, and that was also something I wasn't really anticipating. Because more traditionally, I guess if you have like a director working on the video, they could make all of those executive decisions, but it did require a little bit more creativity from all of us to decide like what is this video gonna, what is the theme of it gonna be like, and what is it all gonna be based around. And so that was really a fun experience to try to just fool around with some ideas, be vulnerable, and share them with each other. I personally, I love these moments in the video where it's like our shadows kind of coincide. And
yeah,
it's beautiful. Even if it's all mainly two-dimensional, like you still have these moments where there's like a flute and then like a hand, like another arm, like a third arm, and then like a leg or something. It's quite beautiful. From like,
oh no.
The lesson is nobody can speak. Oh, there she is.
There you go, you're back. Great. Yeah, I was going to agree. I feel like the way that you use light in the video to create the shadows, but then like you were saying, Kara, the aura that comes from that sort of surrounds each of the silhouettes and the kind of distortion that takes place there is really, really beautiful. I can't wait for our audience to see it. I feel like we're just teasing all sorts of little little elements. We have a question from the audience. What advice would you give to others who haven't yet jumped into the recording, creating of digital work?
Yeah, I personally do not do much recording and creating of digital work. And so I just had to be okay with it being kind of messy quality on my end for a little while. And then finally just doing multiple revisions and eventually figuring out the right angles, figuring out how to duct tape my phone onto a music stand, like, trial and error,
Right.
essentially. But there are some great iPhone apps for video. So I would explore that if you have that as a resource, if you have an iPhone.
It's so wonderful how we all have just this great recording device right on hand. No special equipment needed.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And actually, the way that we were able to capture silhouettes was using a projector. Like, I'm usually playing video games on the projector or whatever, watching TV. But in this case, it was a way to create art. So there are household items and interesting visual things all around us all the time. And I guess, now that we're finally forced to think about it, we're actually experiencing a new dimension of creativity thanks to that.
That's really fantastic. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I think one thing that really drew me to the projector was feeling like I was with another person, honestly, like even if it's just me and my shadow, the kind of interaction between those two. And then eventually to kind of clean it up, it seemed a little cleaner to just have the shadow there. And easier, like logistically speaking, to like arrange the shots.
Definitely. But yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. Your shadow's kind of your partner in the moment. That's wonderful. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just thinking, like, because I know this was about advice for recording, that's something that classical musicians are a little more comfortable with, or at least like analyzing performance is something we've been trained to death with. So that's something that where you can trust yourself. And we made so many mistakes. Although I have to say, WindSync had an advantage during this project, which is that we were able to consult with some folks who are really like top-notch professionals in terms of audio engineering and video editing, even though we were doing all the actual ground level work ourselves. So yeah, there was a moment where I was on the phone panicking with our audio engineer, and he sent over like a diagram he had made in Microsoft Paint to try to communicate this advanced concept to me. And it worked. So I guess my advice is seeking advice and to experiment and use your training too.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel like there's some real themes there, that openness to creativity and openness to advice and collaboration. Absolutely. Very important. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you all to talk a little bit more about the terrific education and community work that you are doing in conjunction with this project. So can you tell our audience a little bit more about what that's going to look like?
Yes, it required quite a bit of bravery from our colleagues in WindSync, and definitely from Akshaya. We kind of just said, oh, hey, by the way. But basically, this involved recording some video diaries, some vlogs, if you will, as we were going through the process of composing and reading and practicing and recording and all of this to basically create a little mini documentary. And that's something that students will be able to watch then to get a window on this particular process, which, I mean, I know that wasn't part of my pre-college experience, like understanding composition and how it works, even though, you know, I played a lot of music as a kid. I just had no idea where it came from.
Yeah.
So this is a way to understand how music does get made. And so we're actually pretty excited about this. We have a partnership coming up. It's our first partnership in a long time with a school in HISD. We're going to be doing some work with the Chavez High School students as they're preparing their own small ensembles on campus. So this will be part of our first kind of virtual package for them to see how chamber music works, so that there's just more context to their experience as they're doing something that you know, usually they kind of are required to do and show up and do. Hopefully this gives them a much richer experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And moving forward, hopefully we'll have actually an even more concise and fun version, and that we can send to some of our young string students who we work with. So stay tuned for that. We're actually pretty excited about that too.
That is so exciting, and it's really wonderful to just see sort of we're here kind of at the beginning. The seed was planted. You've been able to take this project, and it's going to grow and support young artists and aspiring artists to make their own work. That's really incredible.
Well, and another element of these videos that we've compiled as we've gone through the process is, and this is so typical for WindSync and what we do, is we normally create things with children in mind, and then it ends up appealing to everyone. So, because it's so funny, we're like, oh, I bet kids would love to know how a piece of music is made, and then the next thing we know, all of our adult audience members are banging down our door because they want to know. So we made this with students and anyone curious about music in mind, and we do hope that anybody who's interested is able to explore and learn more about that process.
Yeah, actually, a couple of weeks ago, we shared this with some of our older audience members, and I my sister was in the audience. She sent me a text that it was super interesting to her. She had never even considered what the process was like before. And so that was new for her too. It was pretty cool.
That is so cool. Yeah, I think that's always how it is. You just, you know, you make something with one audience in mind, and then everybody wants to know. I mean, our audience here on Facebook and YouTube, they're all curious about how these products get made and how the artistic process works and everything. Yeah.
I'm also curious about that. So if anybody has any ideas, please let me know.
Yeah, we're all just here interested in learning more about each other and what we do. We've got another question. This is a great one. What other artifacts of the pandemic have you connected with?
What kind of artifacts?
I mean, yeah, that's like a super beautiful question. I'm connected with that.
Yeah, it could be very literal or more philosophical, I guess.
Well, I think you could take it either way, right? We've definitely talked about connecting with this sort of digital component that I would say is not necessarily an artifact of the pandemic, but definitely a huge component of our time.
Yeah, and I would say for WindSync, being limited pretty much only to digital connections with our audiences has drawn forward some really interesting things I think we'll keep even as we exit the pandemic. Like, one is immediate interactivity with our audience.
Yeah.
The scrolling comments and the ability to respond to them are actually awesome for us. We love that kind of interactive performance style.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. And being able to have more of a personal relationship with audiences. Now you guys know what my flower bouquet looks like, right? And that's something we just never had before.
Right.
Yeah, I think like just in general, seeing musicians and artists in their homes has been a really interesting artifact of the pandemic. Yeah, I forget what else I was going to say. Oh, I mean, honestly, the pandemic was really great for us because it allowed us to check a bunch of things off the to-do list because we weren't busy touring. Like commissioning Akshaya, like she'd been on the list for forever, and then all of a sudden, Kara and I were sitting around at home, and we're like, let's call her, you know. So like stuff like that, and making more videos with we have lots of performance videos, but making videos that are like really trying to break down what we're doing in an educational way has been on our thoughts and minds like just forever. So. And these things have become really relevant and interesting, and we're hoping to contribute to, I think there is a wealth of things being created, and we're really trying to contribute in a meaningful way.
I definitely feel that from you all, that your contributions have been meaningful for sure. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I'm just thinking, I think as far as the kind of concert hall experience, one thing I really, really love is being able to like project a virtual concert onto the wall and then like shout or like be verbal like while it's happening, like, oh my God, did you hear what they just did? In a way that I would never be able to do that in a concert hall just because of the culture of like calm silence. But there's some way that, you know, just with me and my boyfriend here, we can kind of like shout at the screen very excitedly or like, no, you did not just do that. That is something that I would want to bring into the future. I don't know exactly how, but it's on my mind. And I think another artifact just in general, like artistically, definitely with everything slowing down more, it really does force you to like fill in the holes, like build your foundation, like come back to your foundation and then build it. And so that you can move forward. I think we're all feeling like if you have holes in that foundation, it is deeply like destabilizing.
Yeah.
And I think especially from the point of view of like trying to work with the mystery of creativity, like you have to have a process, like, and know what your process is if you're going to get stuff done right now. So that's something that I've been forced to confront. Yeah, in a very like honest way, trying to be more honest about that.
Yeah, it is interesting what we, especially thinking artifact-wise, what we will take with us as we move back into, you know, gradually some sort of in-person normalcy, you know, system again. Will concerts look different because we've gotten used to having them a certain way at home, you know, and like the changes that we've had to make to our creative processes and our ways of doing things. It's definitely going to be very interesting to see what the future holds. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's about all we have time for this evening, but I did want to make time for one more question, which is just to ask you that in addition to this work, is there any other projects, any other work that you would like to share with our audience? Anything you want to plug that's coming up?
Let's see. I am working on a couple things right now. We don't have dates for all of them, but I'm writing a solo viola piece for Calvin Green and at the University of South Carolina, as well as a piece, violin and percussion piece for Lucia Lynn, a wonderful violinist from the Boston Symphony, and Maria Finkelmeyer. And that they're happening in the spring. They're in progress. So check back. You will be able to find those dates on my website, akshayatucker.com.
Wonderful. We'll make sure to share that as well so folks can find your information. Yeah.
Sure. And on the WindSync side, we will probably be doing what amounts to a virtual tour in the spring of 2021. We have some really fabulous presenters who we have worked with in person, but they're going to be hosting us for virtual performances, and we'll be releasing that on all of our socials at WindSync and at windsync.org. So more coming soon. We are pretty excited to get back to work, even if it's virtual concerts. That'll still feel a little bit more normal.
Wonderful. Yes, absolutely. It will feel good. It does feel good to just sort of push through with all of these new projects. Yeah. Well, I think that's about all we have time for this evening. Thank you to everyone for joining us virtually, for engaging with us during this conversation, and of course, a huge thank you to our program sponsor, Westwood Trust. Before we sign off, I would like to encourage everyone to learn more about and to support the amazing work that WindSync has going on beyond this project with SPA. As Kara mentioned, you can find them at WindSync, and that will also be in the chat. And we'll also share Akshaya's website in the chat as well. Huge thank you to Ani, Kara, and Akshaya. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me this evening and for allowing our audience to get to know you better.
It's a pleasure.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to the premiere.
Society for the Performing Arts is a nonprofit organization. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider learning more about what we do at SPA and supporting our work and the work of our amazing Houston Artist Commissioning Project artists. Our website is linked in the chat and also shown here on screen. And finally, we look forward to having you join us this Thursday, December 17th at 7 p.m. for WindSync's Houston Artist Commissioning Project premiere. That'll be on Facebook, on YouTube Live, and on SPA's website. And the date is right there. So we'll see you then. Thanks all.